And perhaps part of the answers to your prayer are you being directed to a therapist, a counselor, somebody who would be able to help you to say, have you thought about this? Have you thought about that? Tell me about this area of your life.
Hey, welcome to the Overflow Podcast. This is a podcast on a mission to discover how you and I can live a life of abundance, full to overflowing. For Season 4, Philip and I are talking with a mental health therapist to ask questions about anxiety and depression, how we can spot the signs, identify the causes, and fight for an overflowing life. My name is Carl Lindsay, and this is episode 27. Welcome back to another episode. Philip and I will be continuing our conversation from last episode with Jamie Stodola shortly. But if you missed it, I want to remind you that this whole season is made up of a long-form conversation that we've cut up into shorter sections. Today is part 2 of the conversation where we'll get into the value of seeking expert help and talk about some of the stigmas that are surrounding mental health and therapy that seem to be present in the church. Jamie is a licensed marriage and family therapist here in Southern California, and she loves to see her clients grow into their potential. As a therapist, she supports their transformation journey towards healing emotionally, psychologically, and spiritually. Her goal and ours on this podcast is to help you recover from the lies and misbeliefs that have been keeping you from living an overflowing life, and help you to discover the peace and joy that is found in Christ when you become the person God has created you to be. In part 1 of the conversation last week, we got to know Jamie a little bit and talked about how our minds are a battlefield, why we should pay attention to the little things, and why the fight against mental illness is so important. If you haven't yet listened to part 1, pause this, go back and start there. Don't forget to subscribe while you're there so you can get all the upcoming episodes this season. We've got a lot of value coming your way. With that said, let's get into part 2. So this is a podcast about personal growth in a spiritual direction. And during these conversations, we don't want to neglect the spiritual side of things. You've already kind of talked about that with you being a Christian therapist, so I'm sure that's going to come out. So we want to ask from this point here, where do you see mental health and scripture converging?
They most definitely converge. Case in point, Proverbs 23:7 says, "So a man thinketh in his heart, so he is."
Mm-hmm.
Do you need much more than that?
Fair, yeah, that's true.
That's good. No, but I mean, in episode 1, you did talk about the fact that, hey, there is a battlefield in the mind. And so it's like what you're thinking absolutely is affecting who you are and who you will become. I think
and what you're feeling.
Yes. That's the powerful thing for me working in young adult ministry. I realized when I can help a young adult alter their thinking about something, I mean, literally their future can change. I remember one young adult that a buddy of mine was working with just in the gym, and this guy was overweight, didn't like running, nothing. And he just kept coaching him like, bro, you got to get buff. We got to get, going here. Like, you've got to move. This is not your end. You can't just stay in the and it just started to change his thinking. He's like, okay, I'm finally motivated to do this. And that was it. It was starting in the head before the actions actually changed. So, wow. Now, Jamie, you did mention this, and I want to get a little bit from you. You're a Christian therapist.
Yes. So when I originally started my private practice, of course, like on my profiles and such, I claimed that I was a Christian therapist. And then after about a year or so, I decided I wanted to make that more of the, I guess not necessarily the selling point, but that to be front and center.
Yeah.
So yes, I'm a Christian therapist. That means that for me, I include that in my sessions and in our conversations and as a part of their goals and when we talk about morals and principles and values. And I pray with my clients, and it is a part that I encourage. And what's interesting is I have either friends or current clients that I've worked with who've said, yeah, I saw so-and-so, and they would either say, well, they didn't really include anything Christian or talk about anything Christian or how to help me spiritually or biblically. And so usually after our first session or first couple of sessions, they express that to me if I've not already asked, and they've said, well, I'm really looking for a Christian therapist. Eventually they'll say to me, if they didn't already say that this is like so meaningful for them, and they feel so much more at ease or connected because we're speaking to the heart and the soul and the spirituality piece.
I think that's really important because we are mind, body, and spirit. And I think when people neglect that, you're not really doing full healing. I think, I don't know, Carl, what you think about that, but it really seems like that to me.
Yeah, it's true. But there has been like this stigma in the past where psychology is kind of kept separate from the church.
Yes. And so you find a lot of therapists, which I probably looked like at first, that are therapists who are Christian, not a Christian therapist.
Right. So talk about the difference between those two then. What's the difference there?
Well, they might just be professing that they are, or if somebody asks, but it's not how they move through their work with their clients and how they share with them, and or maybe perhaps never even pray with them. In fact, in grad school, I want to say that they told us not to pray with clients. And there were some aspects of grad school where I was really kind of getting discouraged. Like I'm doing this because I want to minister and I want to be able to pray and talk about these things with my clients. So definitely saying I'm a Christian therapist, kind of gives me that foothold to be able to do that.
Yeah.
What about the psychology part of it? Because I think there's been a pushback in terms of the church for years ago, and maybe still now. People aren't so comfortable with the therapy, that idea of psychology.
So it's unfortunate because, as we are discussing today, you have to have all of the pieces together. Right. And I prefer to work from a holistic kind of window, which includes spirituality. It includes the body as well, like daily activities. Obviously not a doctor, but I'll ask things about their routine, their health, vitamins. Have they seen a doctor? This is actually something most therapists should generally do, but I also kind of try to find ways to help them interweave these aspects of life of like, are you sleeping well, and are you drinking and well, and nurturing and nourishing yourself well. So we have to look at all parts of the whole person and being. And the stigma in the church has obviously deterred people.
Sure.
From your guys' perspective, what stigmas have you heard? Like, what is the thing?
Yeah, I mean, I'll tell you this, being a younger generation, there are probably not as many stigmas as there maybe you were in previous generations. But I mean, for instance, I asked my dad, oh man, that sounds tough, man. Tell me your feelings about that. He doesn't even have the words to convey the thought that I mean when I say feelings. He'll tell me about it in the sense of just the practice of it. But feelings, I don't know if... I mean, it's just a different generation. So I think the stigma is just, hey, I don't even have words to use to convey what I'm feeling. And then B, I think it just means that I need help and being vulnerable. And I don't want to do that with anybody.
Yeah.
But maybe God, if that,
The concept that thoughts and feelings are different is very hard for people because they really do. Our thoughts dictate how we're feeling, and they happen so quick that you think they're one and the same. So realizing that a lot of times the thought is the thing that is there first, but what you experience is actually the feeling.
Right.
first.
Okay.
So when you ask somebody, how are you feeling? They'll likely tell you what they think.
Oh,
And if you're not paying attention, also realizing that there's a difference between these
Yeah.
two, you don't even know to potentially redirect the person if you're not tuned into that.
Something might happen on the freeway and you get angry, and then you think why you're angry after that.
that's a good way of putting it. I like that. You felt the feeling first. This person just cut me off. What, and you're
Yeah.
angry, and then you kind of, okay, maybe they're pregnant, they're running to the hospital.
That's beautiful. I mean,
Yeah.
that is like 101 kind of cognitive approach to being upset.
Because your thoughts have to catch up to your feelings.
Yes. So somebody might cut you off. You're ticked off, and they're definitely a person's attitude on the road can really say a lot about the person. We don't have to throw, all of it to say like, oh, something's wrong with you, but because there are days where we're more irritable or whatever.
Sure.
But are you able to, after you have that initial feeling or reaction, to say, okay, like that could have been me. I've done that on the road before.
Yeah.
Maybe they're on the way to the hospital. Maybe they just found out somebody has passed away, or they lost their job, or you
Yeah.
have no idea
Yeah.
what could be happening in
Right.
that person's life, that
Yeah.
they're distracted
Yeah.
or whatever.
Yeah. Going back to the stigma thing,
Mm-hmm.
I was thinking for me, I think it's not so much as a stigma against the psychology as much as it is just the need for a therapist. Because
Yeah.
I'm a Christian, I've got my relationship with God, and therefore I don't need help from a therapist.
That's it.
So how can you speak to that concept in the
That's
church?
it.
Well, the verse is escaping me right now, but there's wisdom in many counselors.
Right.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
Proverbs. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
So that's unfortunate, right? Obviously, it's only, I think, with, the development of the younger generations, bringing in the right kind of language and the right kind of support. There are definitely different cultures, let alone our, like the culture of the church.
Yeah.
But there are other cultures that, ethnic cultures that have lean one way or the other, or approach it differently. So we have to also keep that in mind, because some churches are very culturally diverse. I mean, ours is in general, but some on-location places are more diverse than others. So I think there are many different factors, and just the idea that I would need help and I'm supposed to like fix this on my own, like it's between me and God. And yes, there is that, but there's so much more. So just the idea that I need to go and ask for help. This is actually one of the misbeliefs that a lot of people have, is that I'm considered a failure, or I might be weak if I have to ask for help, or if I, need to get some kind of support.
Yeah. Yeah. I resonate with that. It's like you don't want to give up the fact that I've got everything going. I'm put together well. And when I have to go see someone, it really feels like it's an admission to something really bad is going on. Oh, I don't know how to handle this. I need to go see someone else. Oh, that's just another level.
Where instead, plenty of people actually anticipate a potential meeting with a therapist. They're like, I want to fix this, or I want to solve this, or I want to get to the bottom of this, or I want tools. And so they look at it when they finally come to it, to the realization that they could benefit from that, then they show up. They really show up, which is great.
I mean, you also have, I think, in some cases, the language of theology giving you the access to tools that you feel as though should solve the problem. You think of the Holy Spirit as the comforter, counselor. Hey, I've got a counselor. I don't need to go see a physical one. I've got the Lord on my side. I'm going to pray through this. He's going to help me. And then it's like, but I'm still depressed. What in the world?
So basically, you're shitting on yourself. Okay. It's a cognitive distortion that basically I should be doing this and I should be doing that and I should respond this way and I should get better.
In other words, it's a works-based.
Yes, but it's also leaving out so many other factors as to why you're feeling what you are. There could be other factors that the therapist could point out to you that you have no idea. And perhaps part of the answers to your prayer are you being directed to a therapist, a counselor,
Right.
somebody who would be able to help you to say, have you thought about this? Have you thought about that? Tell me about this area of your life.
You know, some people, I think, also, just kind of throwing this out there, I know this sounds maybe petty, but they're like, why would I pay someone to talk to me? Come on, this seems ridiculous. Like, what could they really do that could help me? You know, I'm going to pay, $100, $200, $300 for an hour to sit with someone. I mean, I think there's also this lack of respect for the profession of therapy and what really can be offered. And that maybe goes beyond just being a Christian, but just in general, the human feeling.
Well, if you have to pay for something, you're much more likely to value it.
Right.
Right. And it's kind of that notion of being a kid in university where you're paying for that education. So some students are like, sweet, no class, or, they cut or whatever. And other students are like, I'm paying for this. I'm going to get every minute of this class. And so when I worked in community mental health, it was funded by the state, the county, and they didn't have to pay anything to be seen by me. And there definitely are talks that we have in the community mental health sector to say, these people would really potentially benefit, even if it's only $5 that they have to pay, because then they're investing in themselves, and they're showing up in that way as well. And so, there definitely is that question, but you're going to value it if you are going to have to, if you have to pay for it.
Yeah. Good point. Good point.
What do you think we can do to break that stigma that we've talked about? What can we do? What would you like to see the church do in terms of being more willing to take on a counselor or a therapist?
I think it starts with church leaders of all sorts. It's, of course, like maybe the conference level, maybe the local conference level, and the church leaders saying, even as simple as like, what would be really exciting for me is if they said, let's have a mental health awareness week or month or whatever it might be. And the discussions or even a seminar, let alone perhaps the sermons, are about that and are encouraging that and are teaching and normalizing it. So I really think that it does start with the leaders. Obviously, sometimes some of the members are very much the leaders, and that's great, but we definitely need more of a collective approach to bringing awareness.
That's
so
good.
That I would love to see a lot more of that.
Yeah. And I would say, some people don't think about this, but others probably care about it very much. But the notion that, hey, I'm going to see someone, but not just anyone, but someone who, like you, Jamie, is a Christian therapist. As a pastor, I would really encourage my church members to go see a Christian therapist as opposed to just any therapist. And the reason why I say that, caveat, I've had several young adults who've gone to just a therapist, and they're talking to them about their boyfriend or girlfriend, and all of a sudden they're introduced to these ideas. Hey, you probably could look at pornography to get a little bit more excited. Hey, why do you guys really worry about having sex before marriage? That's, that's probably dealing with a lot of your guilt and shame and causing your depression. It's like, whoa, wait a second. What in the world? You're now being exposed to things that you normally would not be if you were with a Christian therapist who shares the same morals and values that you do.
Case in point, in regard to our conversation about a therapist who's Christian and a Christian therapist.
Yep.
And then what is also, even when I encourage friends or people that are asking to find a therapist, I say, we're not all created equal, first of all, just in your approach and personality and whatnot, but especially as it pertains to this niche of Christianity as a part of the practice, your therapy practice. Because like you said, somebody could easily be calling themselves Christian, but in a particular area, maybe in the area of sex or sexuality, they fall far on the other side.
Mm-hmm.
And so, you know, it's important to search around, to shop a little bit and understand what their values are. Now, the problem is that some therapists will hold back, and they'll say, well, why do you think that that's important? Because their approach is very different. Their approach is, well, I will talk about whatever you bring, which is true, but they'll only, they're trained to only guide to where the client, like where the client is landing on their beliefs, rather than having a foundation, having some morals.
Right.
They've essentially, in the psychology field, they've tried to take out the fact that you have morals. And that's part of what was so discouraging to me when I was in grad school, because they're like even ethically saying like you can't have morals. What are you going to go off of if you don't have morals?
Wow. Yeah, I think that's why I would always say it is so important for you to not only shop around, but then to say to various people that you know in your life who you trust and recommend, hey, is there a therapist that you've been to, that you've seen, that can help in this circumstance that you know is a believer? You know, so getting that word of mouth is really big too. And getting those recommendations from people at church.
Yeah. And don't be afraid to go to the first or even second session and kind of be evaluating for yourself. It unless you're already feeling at ease and you kind of understand where their principles lie and whatnot, you're kind of interviewing them as well.
True. Yeah.
You know, and part of the problem then, unfortunately, is there are plenty, especially young people, but just a lot of lost people who don't really know, and they might be struggling with some of those distinct topics that you mentioned a moment ago. And so, what a travesty if they fall in the hands of a therapist that's just going to go where whatever the client is saying.
I like how you said that. We're not all created equal in therapy.
And I tell I see my clients the first time, and it's risk-free the first time. And so I tell them, and sometimes they already do have another session set up with someone else. And I said, that's great. Do it. This needs to be able to fit for you. And so then, of course, it's my prayer that if they would get just as much benefit from that person, that they go, that works and they want to, that fits for them. So I definitely encourage it. If they tell me, or if they're like, I'm not sure. And I'm like, that's okay. Go and find another therapist and see what that feels like.
Love that. Well, if you're listening and you're a church leader or a soon to be church leader, you heard it here. We need mental health conversations in the church. So please get those started in your local friend group or in your circle of influence.
Yeah, absolutely. Hey, thank you so much, Jamie. Appreciate it.
You're welcome.
Thanks for listening in today. Don't forget that part 3 of this conversation will continue next week. We're going to be talking about the topic of anxiety, how we can identify anxiety. So make sure to subscribe to stay connected. You don't want to miss an episode. Please also leave us a rating or a review on Apple Podcasts. That would be really helpful. We'd love to hear from you. And if you'd like to get in touch with Jamie, or if you're looking for a therapist to work with, the link to her practice is in the show notes. She offers remote sessions as well. But you can email her at jamie.wellbeing@gmail.com. And if you have questions or comments for us, we'd love to hear from you. You can find us on Instagram at choose2overflow, or send us an email at hello@choose2overflow.com. Don't forget, we also have reflection guides on the website to help you continue today's conversation with others. That's choose2overflow.com. Thanks again for listening this week. We hope you choose to overflow in your week ahead. Let's chat again soon.